Hello YouTube and welcome to the channel. Now then, on today's video we're going to be looking at this. It's the MJX Hyper Go, and in particular it's this version here, the H16E, which is this sort of truggy version. And it's very kindly been donated to the channel by a friend of the channel for an unboxing and teardown, which is precisely what we're going to do today. Now I think he paid 87 quid for this, which is about $108 for our American brethren. It was on special offer because these things aren't particularly cheap, considering it's just a 1/16th sort of buggy. Normally here in the UK anyway, they sort of float around 120, 130 quid, which is a reasonable amount of money to pay for, like I say, a 1/16th truggy. So I am genuinely, or I have been wanting to get hold of one of these for the channel for a little while actually, because I genuinely want to see what sort of technology goes into this, because I know they have GPS and all sorts of bits and pieces, and also I want to see what sort of quality you get for your sort of 130 quid. Like I say, he didn't pay anything like this. It was on a special offer, so this was bargain really. So anyway, enough waffle. Let's just have a quick look at the box and we'll crack it open and see what we get. Now I know this thing comes with GPS. MJX make drones and stuff like that, so apparently there's a lot of drone technology in this. Now how relevant that is to a sort of 1/16th buggy, I don't know, but apparently it's got a GPS and a little full-time GPS receiver, and I believe you can get an app for your phone. Now, what's it called? It's called something. Oh, that's it, yeah. Hyper Wheels, and I think it might even give you something like speed, distance travelled, where it's been. Now, like I say, how relevant that is to a 1/16th truck, I don't know, but anyway. Like I say, enough waffle, let's crack the box open and see what we get. Right then, in the box we get our instructions and parts manual, pretty standard stuff. We get a little amendment because this is the version 3 model, and from what I can tell, version 3 has adjustable turnbuckles on the steering and several other improvements, and I believe it comes with a phone holder for the transmitter, so you can download the app and you can watch the speed and all sorts on that, so that's pretty cool. We have several bags of bits and pieces. We have the phone holder, which attaches, like I say, to the transmitter. We have a wheelie bar, which is probably going to come in handy. We have the rear wing, and we have a very trick looking USB charger, screwdriver and metal wheel hex as well, which is worth weight in gold if you get one of those. And if you're watching WL Toys, stop putting the plastic ones in. We get the transmitter, which is, I can see it's got some features on there: throttle dual rate, steering trim, steering dual rate. You can reverse the throttle and the steering, and it's got an FN button, which I'm presuming is something to do with the GPS, etc. And there's a button on the actual control, which I'm not sure what that does yet. We'll have a look at the instructions. It takes 3 AA batteries, which of course you have to supply. Last but not least, we've got the actual truck itself. Now then, it's quite a good looking thing actually, and immediately looking round it, even in this first few minutes, I can tell that this thing does look a decent quality piece of kit. It's got metal oil shocks on it. We'll start taking this thing apart and let's see what we actually get for our sort of 120, 130 quid. But first impressions, it does look as though I can see where your money goes. Right then, now that we've got the truggy body off, I can instantly tell you that this thing does not look like your average 1/16th scale Chinese truck. There are several bits and pieces on here that you just don't find anywhere else, or it's very rare. The first and the obvious one is this little GPS unit here. I mean, apart from sort of drones and aircraft and probably some boats, I don't think I've ever seen one on a little truck before. We've also got a 390 brushed motor here. This does have a brushless version as well, but it's actually got a cooling fan, which again, I don't think I've ever seen a cooling fan on one of these little 1/16th scale trucks, although some of them could honestly do with one. Now then, the battery is a very strange affair. It actually comes in a special pack, so we have to undo this latch and actually take it out, and I believe it's only sort of a 1000 milliamp hour battery pack. But you obviously plug in the Dean's connector here and charge it up there. Now, it fits in really well, and it's a nice snug and secure fit, but I would imagine it does limit you somewhat to only using MJX sort of batteries. And again, it's sort of, I don't even know if it's a LiPo or lithium ion. Oh, it's a LiPo, 1000 milliamp hour LiPo, so it'll have some go in it. But again, it might be a little, although it's a good idea, it might be a little bit restrictive later on when you possibly want to, I don't know, put some larger batteries in. However, that does look like quite a sizable tray, so you might even be able to get like a 2200 milliamp hour battery in there. But the way the battery fits in, you know, that's not going anywhere. That's really secure. It's very, very clever, that is. Anyway, let's start ripping this thing apart, because my interest now has been piqued, because this does look significantly different than most other sort of RCs of a similar ilk. Right, before we start tearing this thing apart, a word of warning. Always read the instructions, because I've just found out what this little button does on the side of the transmitter. It's called in the instructions ejection, but it's like a launch control, and it basically propels the car forward at 100% of the power instantaneously. So if you press it, I've literally just pressed it and the thing shot off across my desk and knocked my tea over. So always read the instructions before you start pressing buttons. I mean, I don't think I've ever come across anything with like launch control on it. That's absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, anyway, the light button is labelled up as FN at the front, and you can basically turn it on and off. But check this steering servo out, how quick it is. That's well rapid, that is. But anyway, this button is launch control. Right, let's start with the wheels. These tyres feel nice and soft and compliant, and I think they've got foams in them as well. So they do feel a reasonable quality set of tyres there. They are held on by hexes and nuts. But it would be nice to see some metal wheel hexes at this price point, but I mean, you can't have everything, I suppose. These shock absorbers are oil filled, and I must admit they do feel rather plush and look a decent quality as well. Very similar to sort of H16E Pro ones, I must admit, but I think they're slightly shorter versions if I'm not much mistaken. But they do seem a nice good quality set of shocks on this, which is important. We'll start tearing the suspension down now and take it from there. Right, then we'll continue on with the suspension and steering. We've got our two little adjustable V3 turnbuckles here, which you can adjust the toe in and toe out of the front wheels, which is a nice touch. We've got 4 identical drive shafts, front and rear. Now these are extremely substantial, and the thickness of the shaft I would normally associate with the truck sort of 1/10, 1/12 scale. So these look really over-engineered for a 1/16 scale sort of truggy. If you've got a HBX 16889, these components for the suspension will look very, very similar, very familiar, I should say, to you. They look almost identical. I will say this though, the plastic doesn't feel quite as nice HBX plastic, but like I say, they look very, very familiar if you've got a 16889. A nice touch as well, we've got some metal bracketry that the sort of wishbone shafts sit in. Again, that's a nice touch there, quite durable, front and rear. Now that's pretty much the suspension and the steering covered. We've got some metal drive cups on the wheel side on the diffs, before I forget. I think what we'll do now is we'll remove the centre drive shaft cover so we can have a look at that, take the motor out, etc. I mean, before we go any further, one thing I did notice, and I forgot to mention earlier on in the video, is the weight of this thing. It's got some weight to it. Anyway, let's get these covers off and have a look at the transmission. Right then, transmission wise, we've got full metal differentials, front and rear. I'm not going to take these apart because I can tell just by rotating them that they've got metal gears inside. 100% guarantee you. Centre drive shaft is fully metal. We've got metal gears everywhere. We've got our 390 brushed motor, which has got a metal pinion on the end. Does that look familiar to anyone? 16889 anyone? Yeah. Even down to the pinion itself, I think that's very, very similar. In fact, the whole layout of this is very, very similar to a HBX, which is no bad thing because they are superb. Electronics wise, obviously we've got our little GPS unit. I've got our little 3-wire steering servo with a servo saver. That seems quite powerful and quick. We've got our little brushed ESC. I do like the fact that you can unplug the motor from it as well, which is a nice touch. Obviously got bullet connectors on the motor side, and that pretty much covers this thing actually. That's pretty much voided the warranty as well, but yeah, we've pretty much stripped the start thing down to the bare bones. Now then, what did we think of our MJX Hyper Go here from our little teardown? Now, well, before we do that, I actually found a 16889 spare chassis, and I don't know if you can tell there, it's very, very, very similar to the Hyper Go one, and the Hyper Go's 390 motor slots straight in, no problem at all. So I wouldn't be surprised if these two, you could actually swap bits and pieces over, transmission pieces over, and they would actually fit. So, and suspension components as well, because they do look very, very similar. Anyway, what did we think of our MJX Hyper Go? Well, let's do some good and bad points. Let's start with the bad points first, the cons. Without a discount, this thing is a bit pricey. I mean, here in the UK, they retail for, the brushed ones retail for about 130 quid. The brushless can go anywhere up to sort of 180 quid. I've seen them for 179.99. That is an awful lot of money to pay for what is essentially a 1/16 brushed or brushless Truggy buggy, whatever you want to call it. Especially when you consider that for 100 quid you can go and buy the 16889 Pro, which is the elephant in the room, really. Is it worth an extra 30 to 80 quid over the Pro? In my opinion, probably not. The other thing I wasn't totally sold on was, I don't know, this sort of justifies the extra price, but this thing is very gimmicky. I mean, do you need a button for launch control? Do you need GPS on a Truggy? I mean, I can understand where MJX have come from. You know, they come from the drone side, so they've tried to shoehorn some drone technology into it, but I don't think it really works in a sort of 1/16 truck. I mean, if you want to see where you've gone, I mean, you just watch it as you go up and down the street, or watch it wherever. You know, I think it's a bit pointless. So yeah, I wasn't overly keen on the price, and I think it's trying too hard. Now, let's actually discuss the things I liked about this. And although this thing is a little bit gimmicky, I did actually like some of the unique features this thing has. Although the battery might be a little bit limiting, I do like the fact that you can clip it in and out of the chassis, and it basically isn't going anywhere. So you could probably jump this thing to your heart's content, and you wouldn't have the battery flying out from underneath the bodywork. So I do like the fact that although it's a little bit limiting, and I can imagine these things are quite expensive to replace, but you do have options for different batteries anyway. But I do like the fact that you can clip the battery in and out. That's a good idea. Also, I did actually like the fact that this thing comes with a phone mount for the transmitter. Now, if you've ever shot a YouTube video, these things are invaluable. So including a phone mount, although I mean, I know what it's for, as you can see, I think you can on the app. I haven't tried the app, but I think you can get like a display of possibly speed, etc. like that. But if you were filming this thing, a phone mount for the actual transmitter is invaluable. I did also like the way that this thing is screwed together. It does seem a nice solid piece of kit. There are certain areas that are slightly better than the HBX with regards to some metal bracketry, etc. And I think it's just been very well thought out. I think it's been overthought in certain areas, and you get needless features, but in general I think this thing has been very well thought out, and MJX have actually brought some interesting ideas to the table. Okay then, conclusion time. Would I actually recommend the MJX Hyper Go to anyone based on this teardown? And I'm going to say yes, but there is a caveat to that. If you are paying 87 quid for this thing, then it is well worth 87 quid. Even though it's the brushed version, it's, in my opinion, it's worth 87 quid all day long. I mean, I do love the fact that they've actually gone to the trouble of adding a fan to the 390 motor. I mean, if you've ever run one of these little 160 trucks with these little brushed motors in, I mean, they can get absolutely red hot, and it just causes them to fail prematurely. Bonsai Intrepid, mentioning no names, future video. But yeah, I mean, the fan is a welcome addition to a little brush motor like this. However, putting all the trick features aside, if you're paying the normal sort of retail of 130 quid for this thing, or £180 for the brushless, which is incidentally is a ridiculous amount of money to pay for a 1/16 brushless truck. I honestly don't think it's worth it. I would like to see MJX bring out a version without the GPS, without the launch control, for about 80-90 quid for the brushed. And to be honest, I think that'd be well worth it, because I do like the fact that this is very well screwed together. It does seem like a nice, good quality piece of kit, but I don't think we need half of these features, to be honest. Anyway, if you found this video of some use and interest, please give it a big thumbs up, and if you're feeling that way inclined, hit that subscribe button for more similar future content. It makes a massive difference to the channel, and it only takes you a couple of seconds. Once again, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you again very, very soon. Thank you.